Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation. Its title today is From Intent to Impact, Embedding EDI in Every Corner of HR. So my name is Lin Gallagher. I'm an executive in residence here at Johnson Shoyama Graduate School of Public Policy. And I'm really pleased today to be able to welcome you to this event as your moderator. So I'll start off by talking a little bit about the school. So Johnson Shoyama Graduate School of Public Policy, or as we refer to it as JSGS, it's a national hub for advanced study and research in public policy administration. We're a partnership between the University of Regina and the University of Saskatchewan. And really that collaboration was based on the spirit of cooperation and collaboration that defines Saskatchewan. Since our inception in 2007, we've swiftly become one of Canada's leading policy schools for educating graduate students and public servants who are interested in and devoted to advancing public value. At this time, before we get going, I really want to acknowledge that while today's event is taking place online, JSGS's physical homes are located on Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 territories. The original lands of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the traditional homeland of the Métis. In addition, one of our presenters here is presenting from Ottawa, which was built on unceded Anishinaabe-Algonquin territory. The people of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We're glad to welcome those of you joining us from across Turtle Island and make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory reside on or are visiting. We encourage you to take a moment to reflect on the land you reside on and think about and express gratitude for the place and for the people who have safeguarded it throughout time. If you feel comfortable, you're welcome to share your land acknowledgement through the chat function. And as you do, please think about actions we can identify to actively engage in reconciliation and to honor the land and its people. For those of you who are new to the EDI discussion series, I'm really pleased to welcome you today. This series focuses on engaging current and future public servants on issues pertaining to equity, diversity, and inclusion in the public sector in particular. The series is proudly supported by the Max Bell Foundation, who encourage the development of forward-looking innovations that impact public policies and practices. If you'd like more information on the Max Bell Foundation or their work, please click on the chat and you'll see a link there that'll help you with that information. So, our panel speakers today, they're going to be sharing a lot of information about enhancing human capital and workplace equity, diversity, and inclusion, or sometimes what I'll refer to as EDI, along with some practical examples and tools and resources. As a past senior leader in the Saskatchewan provincial government, in my experience, strong EDI policies and programs play a vital role in fostering workplace culture, and one that values and respects individual differences, ensures fair treatment, and promotes equal opportunities for all employees. It can also enhance employee engagement, innovation, and collaboration where all voices are heard and valued. Additionally, integrating EDI principles in managing human resources in the public sector really can reinforce public trust and align human resource practices with the broader goal of social justice and accountability in government institutions. So before we proceed, our speakers are going to be sharing information on topics that may trigger or re-stimulate trauma to some of you attending today's event. So we've recognized the need for safety measures to minimize the risk associated with triggering. If you're experiencing distress as a result of this presentation, please look on the Zoom chat for a list of resources. Now for some just details around the running of the event to help it run smoothly. We're going to ask that all attendees stay muted and turn off their video during the first part of our event. And feel free when we move on to the Q&A section to turn your videos back on. I think it's always helpful to see faces. The format for today's event is as follows. So following speaker introductions, we'll have each speaker present for about 5 minutes to provide some information on their background and how it relates to today's topic. Then we'll move on to a moderated Q&A session, which will give you, our audience, a chance to come up with questions for our panelists. And following this, I may ask some questions as we give you some time, and you can start the chat right away. And if you would like to ask a question, use the Zoom chat function and you send the questions to myself, Lin Gallagher, and I'll pose your questions to the panelists. Feel free to submit your questions anytime during the event. If you have any logistical questions during today's event, don't hesitate to send a message to Karen Jaster-LaForge. You'll see her name in the list of attendees. Karen's great at this job, and so you can either chat her or send her an email at jsgs.events@uregina.ca. That will also be in the chat if you need to do that. And if you take a look and you need to contact Karen, she'll be able to help you. And so also, just as a side note, as with all of our EDI presentation, this presentation is going to be recorded and it'll be available for viewing on the JSGS website at a later date if you feel you want to share it. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers. I'm going to, with the logistics out of the way, I thought I'd introduce all the speakers at one time, and I'm going to introduce them in the order that they're going to present. So our first presenter is going to be Lindsay Coffin. And Lindsay is a Principal Research Associate for the Human Capital Knowledge Area at the Conference Board of Canada. Excuse me. She's been involved with several projects aimed at enhancing human capital and workplace equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives for the Canadian organizations. Prior to studying human capital trends at the Conference Board of Canada, she did research in mining industry, labor market trends, and diversity initiatives. Our next speaker is going to be Sujatha Roth. Sujatha, or Dr. Ross, is with the University of Regina in the Human Resources. She is the lead for the University Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office. Sujatha is passionate about fostering meaningful engagement and conversations that address systematic inequities, promote inclusion, and create spaces of belonging. With a commitment to amplifying and creating opportunities for non-dominant voices, she has the privilege of working in academia, grassroots organizations, and mental health service provision across diverse geographical locations. As an advocate and an ally, she challenges power imbalances while creating knowledge with those whose voices have become often too marginalized. And our third speaker is Michael Lavis. Michael is the founding CEO of Creative Options Regina, COR, for impact charitable organizations that delivers personalized support services to people experiencing disability in Regina, Saskatchewan. It's under his leadership, COR has grown into one of the province's leading support providers in the mental health and disability sector. Michael is deeply committed to fostering a culture of gentleness with strong focus on employee experience and workplace well-being. So I'm going to now turn it over to our speakers, and I'm pleased to turn it over to Lindsay to begin our first presentation. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Lynn. So as Lynn mentioned, my name is Lindsay Coffin, and I am a Principal Research Associate at the Conference Board of Canada. And my knowledge area is human capital. But under human capital slide is the inclusion knowledge area. And our inclusion research portfolio is anchored around how to bridge gaps between research and practice to make meaningful change happen. As we know, there's an ongoing need for actionable research insights, and I would say that this need is growing in the current climate. And what this means is we're looking for robust evidence on what strategies, tools, and approaches work best and understanding who they work best for. And we really aim to provide critical insights on how to effectively move the dial on workplace culture and embed inclusion within the DNA of organizations. Slide. Today, I'm going to focus primarily on our research related to disability inclusion. And this is an area we've been studying for about 10 years. I will share these resources with Karen and she can post them in the chat after I'm done speaking. And we are currently working on 2 new projects, slide, with the Canadian Association for Supported Employment. One is looking at mentorship in the workplace, inclusive mentorship practices for people with disabilities, as well as disability disclosure and the barriers and facilitators to disability disclosure in the workplace. And how we're looking at this is really by looking at some key research questions. Slide. That include, what does disability disclosure look like in Canadian workplaces? What are the factors that influence individuals' choices to disclose a disability, both when applying for a job and during the course of their employment? And then really digging in a little deeper and looking at what mentoring models are being leveraged in companies as it relates to disability inclusion, and does this help, facilitate disclosure in a workplace? And really, how do mentorship programs within workplaces benefit people with disabilities? And the way we're doing this is using a multi-method approach. Slide. And that involves a robust literature review, a survey with 100 employers, a survey with 1,000 Canadians with disabilities, 2 employer roundtables, and 40 interviews with employers, mentees, and mentors. So we have a really robust data set informing kind of our research. And what the key thing that I'm going to leave you with, slide, is that there's a clear gap for disability disclosure in Canada. And that's for a host of reasons. Deciding whether to disclose a disability at work is a deeply personal and complex decision. As we know, disability encompasses a broad range of lived experiences that shape how individuals engage in the workplace. There are many factors that influence disclosure, including workplace policies, leadership support, past experiences, as well as the outcomes of accommodation requests. While disclosure is often seen as a pathway to accommodations, it can also carry risks and expose individuals to potentially negative consequences. We know that more than 1/4 of Canadians are estimated to live with a disability. Given this number, we estimate that around 17% of employed individuals experience disabilities. However, when we asked organizations what percentage of their employees had disabilities, and this was primarily done through self-identification surveys, was about 6%. And what these numbers show us is that there's a huge gap from the employer perspective, that there is a substantial proportion of currently employed individuals with undisclosed disabilities. And this is either because they choose not to disclose or because of existing self-identification processes that do not fully capture them. Of course, I'm not making the claim that we should expect disclosure to happen at all times. It's a personal choice, and individuals may not want to or feel that they need to disclose. Lots of individuals think that this is a private matter, and others don't feel that they need to disclose because they don't require accommodations. However, what our results suggest is that within this group, there are individuals who require or who could benefit from supports and accommodations to thrive in their roles. Identifying and removing barriers to disclosure is essential to fostering accessibility in the workplace. And that's the focus of the efforts toward facilitating workplace disclosure. And with that, Lynn, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Very interesting. And so now we'll move on and I'll turn it over to you, Sujatha, for your presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Slide. I want to begin this presentation by respectfully acknowledging that the University of Regina is located on Treaty 4 territory with a presence in Treaty 6, and that I am privileged to live, learn, and work on these shared lands. I'm the advisor or equity lead with the University of Regina, and today I'll be sharing how we need to embed EDI into human resources strategy. Slide. EDI today is complex, it is challenged, but crucial. EDI is complex because it intersects with multiple dimensions of identity, which could be race, gender, disability, sexuality, age, that can interact in nuanced ways or intersectionality, and organizational structures and unconscious biases that are deeply rooted are not easily changed. We also find that challenges in measuring impact without oversimplifying identity or lived experience exist. EDI has several challenges, and today we know the challenges include our current socio-political climate, which are seen to be either too, and EDI is seen as either too ideological or too ineffective. And also, we have a lot of criticisms that there is an over-reliance on identity-based labels and not shared values. Or we also get criticism that it is tokenistic or performative. And we find that those who are advocating for EDI or taking a stand for EDI are facing burnout among the groups. Slide. The last point there was that, which I couldn't see there, was the lack of accountability from leadership or buy-in. But in spite of the challenges, in spite of what we are facing today, EDI is also crucial because we need our communities, our workspaces to reflect and represent the community we serve. We need EDI to address the talent shortages by leveraging the full potential of all employees. Also, it has been established through research, through journals, through practice, that diverse teams drive innovation, creativity, and have stronger results. It also fosters a workplace where everyone feels valued, heard, and respected. And it enhances the organizational reputation and trust with stakeholders and the public. Slide. However, when we look at both representation and inclusion, we find that oftentimes our focus becomes more on getting a representative workforce. But if we fail to be inclusive, then we really do not fully benefit from having this diverse workforce or a representative workforce. And so for an organization to be truly successful, we need both representation as well as a workforce that feels welcomed and included. Slide. Some of the things that we could do for representation is affirmative action. Now, this has been challenged a lot of the time, but we know that these actions are very necessary and important because otherwise individuals will never, who are marginalized or disadvantaged, will never get a seat at the table. And some of the ways at the University of Regina, we've been doing this is through having preference or targeted postings. Targeted postings are both much more difficult, where we focus. We look at where our representation is not meeting the SASC human rights targets in representation or the community that we represent, and we try to meet that through affirmative recruiting. And we have some challenges with that, because oftentimes when we do targeted postings, it could result in a failed search. So we also do preference posting, where we first try and target the groups that we really want to see represented within our organization. We try to reach out in different ways. And if that doesn't work, then we open and look at an open hiring process. So constantly we are reviewing and setting targets, and that is one way in which we are trying to recruit and retain individuals. But we cannot retain individuals without inclusion. And I want to share these two statements with you. One is that one size does not fit all. We cannot follow the same processes for every group. Oftentimes, we think for equity seeking groups, this is the way it should be done. And constantly, we are acknowledging that it doesn't work that way. And the other statement that I want to leave there is nothing without us for us. Because if we do a top-down approach by thinking this is good, this is how we do representation and recruitment, then we are not really hearing what people really want, what persons with disabilities or gender diverse individuals really want, how they want themselves to be seen, heard, valued within the organization. And so I just want to quickly leave these four things that are really important to create inclusion. One is procedural, fairness in how decisions are made. Oftentimes we hear through employment engagement surveys that individuals do not have a voice. They do not have the ability, or they are not part of the decision-making processes. So we need to understand how privilege, lack of privilege works, move beyond our biases and assumptions, create transparency in the processes. The second thing is distributive, fairness in outcomes, pay, and workload. And oftentimes we find this exists within organizations. And as human resource personnel, we are really responsible to ensure that across board there is pay equity for racialized individuals, persons with disabilities, indigenous persons. And then the third thing is interpersonal, fairness in how people are treated, creating opportunities, providing seats, nominating someone to sit at a table, mentoring, building success, and creating safe and brave spaces, and advancing diverse talent into executive, management, technical, and board roles. In other words, we need to really ensure that leadership is more reflective of the community we serve. And the final thing is informational, where organizations should share adequate and truthful information. Oftentimes, it's not sharing the information, just withholding information. And that is really crucial when it comes to ensure that everyone is included, everyone is having access to how they can be successful and grow and thrive within an organization. Slide. And some of the practical takeaways that I would like to leave here is reframe and rebuild. And today I was at a conference, which I'm attending for a couple of days on the National Building Reconciliation Forum. And they said, don't use the words rebuild, reconciliation, and all these words of rebuilding, but rather to say what we have, and then to say that we need to strengthen them. And I thought, okay, I should change some of my terminology too. So we need to move beyond surface level diversity and address the intersectionality, the structural inequities in meaningful ways. and engaging with integrity. Center our individuals' lived experiences, avoiding tokenism, ensuring that our EDI efforts are genuine and not performative. Again, change and fix processes. Apply fairness across recruitment, pay, promotion, decision-making, procedurally, distributively, interpersonally, and informationally. Creating transparency through open calls, sharing information clearly, demystifying how opportunities and decisions are being made. And by doing that, we will build a sustainable EDI culture. Embed EDI into our everyday practices through leadership accountability, continuous learning, and long-term commitment. Slide. And when we do that and try to embed it in all aspects of and the very fabric of our organization and institution, equity, diversity, and inclusion become more than buzzwords. They become meaningful. And in today's world, we know with social media, the narratives against EDI, against DEI, whatever you may call it within your organization and institution, this is really important because the principles remain. We all need to feel included. Everyone who's within an institution need to feel included. And that's the role of human resources. And that's the crux of what we want to see happening within our institutions and organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujatha. So now we're going to move on to Michael. So I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Lynn. Here, let me get my slide deck loaded up here. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to share with all of you. And of course, my contribution to the EDI discussion today is really looking at through a focused lens, or through the focus of how are we including people with intellectual disabilities in the workplace. And for us as an organization, as Lynn mentioned, I'm working with an organization called CORE within the mental health and disability services sector here in Saskatchewan. But in Regina, we partnered together in 2014 with the University of Regina to create what became known as the 4 to 40. 4 to 40 is an inclusive employment initiative where we're connecting with forward-thinking employers who embrace a flexible 4 to 40-hour work week. And when I guess for folks to sort of understand a little bit about where we come from and the work that we're doing, Campus for All, of course, is an inclusive post-secondary program at the University of Regina. It's really an incredible program and unique in many ways, in that it creates an opportunity for people with intellectual disabilities to participate in academics, in university life. And of course, there are sort of 3 pillars of inclusive post-secondary: it's social, academic, and employment. And it's that third pillar where we found an opportunity to come together and create something that's truly impactful. For CORE, of course, we are a nonprofit, a charitable organization. I've been working in the realm of mental health and disability for the past 15 years, and supporting both children and adults in supported living and in various aspects of their life. For us, our focus is on, we believe that caregiving is grounded in this idea of companionship and community. But when we look at the 4 to 40 model, why is it different? What does it actually mean, right? We're talking about how do we prepare, how do we connect, and how do we sustain employment for people that are experiencing that disability, right? And we do that, we talk about preparing and connecting. That's an important aspect, but really what we're getting at, the heart of what we're trying to achieve, is lasting social and economic inclusion. Right. And the pillars, the way we approach our work, is through job customization, right? Is helping employers see what's possible, right? Looking to those traditional job postings, those job descriptions, and helping them to see, what's possible and how we can change or transform some of those traditional practices and approaches to employment so that they can be inclusive of a person with an intellectual disability. And of course, job coaching is paramount. And when we talk about job coaching, what we're really talking about is providing that support, building that relationship, and cultivating a partnership with those employees and those employers to help ensure success. And that's that third pillar of practice, that job maintenance piece. It's ensuring that long-term success and doing that through relationship building with employers. When I think about employer support and outcomes, of course, we're not only supporting employers through customized onboarding, but we're actually providing opportunities for a long-term collaboration and partnership. But most importantly, we're talking about success. And when I think about success for an employee, for a person with an intellectual disability, it's really as simple as I fit, I contribute, and I belong. For employers, we're talking about improved retention, satisfaction, boost in productivity and team morale. There are a number of successes that employers experience when they think about the demographics of their workforce and are they truly inclusive. Which I think, for the reality is many of us have a lot more work to do in that area. At the heart, though, when we look at the work that we're doing, is we're really challenging those traditional approaches towards supported employment, right? There are a number of supported employment programs and organizations helping to assist people to access work in this province and across this country. But for us, we took a step back and we looked at the people and engaged with those that we are supporting and tried to, understand what were the challenges they were experiencing, not only accessing, but sustaining that employment. And ultimately, what it comes down to is focusing on belonging over placement, right? And relationships over routine, right? It's not just about hiring. It's about how we're changing the perceptions and attitudes and how we think about inclusion. And, when I think about diversity and equity and inclusion. And we know that, many companies across this country have diversity statements and policies in place. But what I also know is that many of those diversity strategies are not inclusive of people experiencing an intellectual disability, right? We've had some great success over the last 10, 15 years, 10 years, I guess, we started this project. And here today, are a number of our employer partners working across Saskatchewan and helping to create opportunities to cultivate a sense of belonging for people experiencing intellectual disabilities. So Lynn, I'm going to turn it back to you, and thank you.
Thank you, all three of you. I think that through your comments, it really does support and confirm that EDI principles, are important throughout the employment cycle, right from recruitment to onboarding to training to leadership development, right through to even how you design your compensation. So it's really quite useful comments. And I want to thank you for your presentations. And before we get on to questions, just to give folks that are online here a chance to start adding some questions, I would just start with a couple of questions that I have here. And I think the first one here would be for you, Lindsay. You had some interesting stats for people around, who is actually self-identifying if they were experiencing disability in the workplace. What are some of the steps that an organization can take to strengthen workplace inclusion, for people experiencing disability? What are some practical examples?
That's an excellent question. Thanks, Lynn. So employers do play a really key role in fostering accessibility. So going beyond creating policies and environments where individuals feel comfortable disclosing, they can implement inclusive practices that actually reduce the need for disclosure in the first place. So integrating accessibility into policies, physical spaces, technologies, and workplace culture kind of ensures that a more inclusive environment, not only for people with disabilities, but for all employees. There are a few ways organizations can do this. So one is removing the red tape. We heard time and time again in our interviews that accommodation processes aren't accessible, or that there are many accommodations that can be offered proactively without the need for disclosure. So these include making policies to changes related to flexible hours, remote work, medical leave, unpaid leave, or implementing practices such as mentoring and coaching and making sure that those are inclusive. And then another key to that is communicating that these are available to employees, because a lot of employees aren't really aware of what's available to them. Organizations can also go back to the hiring stage and embed accessibility in those practices. So make accommodations easily and readily accessible for people applying to jobs, telling them what's available and putting it in the job posting so they don't have to go out of their way to ask for assistance if they need it. Not only does it make it accessible for people with disabilities, but some of the things that folks are asking for, like interview questions in advance, makes sense for everyone, not just those with disabilities. So it makes the hiring practices more inclusive, ultimately leading to a better pipeline of more diverse talent.
Great. I think that's so important to think about it is embedding it into the culture and having it, be a part of how the organization operates. Thank you. Sujatha, you talked a little bit about how, EDI needs to be more than a buzzword. And I think that, I'd be interested in, how can HR really foster genuine inclusion when many EDI initiatives are increasingly seen as politicized or performative, as you talked about, especially in a polarized work environment?
Thanks for that great question and an important question in our current climate. One of the ways that we can foster EDI is through education and exposure and messaging. I think these are really key in today's world because we are hearing so much of those counter messages. We are hearing so much in the media. We are hearing so much in different forums and spaces. So sharing that messaging that EDI is really important and that it includes everyone. And I think that message needs to get across because EDI is often seen as for individuals who are equity seeking and not as something that is relevant to everyone. So that is, I think, one of the first things that we have to do as HR to change this kind of politicized and performative the way that EDI is seen as political and also performative. The other thing in polarized work environments is also to having conversations, engaging in conversations. And one of the practical examples that I could give at the university is that we are offering a lot of workshops, not just to talk about, discrimination or microaggressions or intercultural awareness, but actually we are building workshops called intergroup dialogue sessions where we are trying to bring individuals together from those who have privileged positions, those who come from less privileged spaces, and being able to come into a space to have brave and safe conversations. And I think that interaction is so crucial. Later in this month, we are trying to do that with our research community. And I think those are those impactful ways in which we can build get the conversation going. And also, it gives an opportunity for individuals in a safe place to challenge, to ask those questions, those doubts they have regarding EDI. So I think that would be one practical thing. And The other thing is to ground ourselves in our policies and laws. We all know that we have a Saskatchewan Human Rights Code. Within University of Regina, we have the Respectful University Policy, the Employment Equity Policy. We have a Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We have in our Constitution the rights of Indigenous peoples, and to familiarize, I don't want to use the word but to familiarize ourselves again with those important and hard-won rights that we have, and to, acknowledge them, share them with our communities, share them with our institutions, organizations, so that then we can get grounded in those policies, because it's very easy to lose those rights. It's hard to get them back in. So, and we know, like across the border, women have lost reproductive rights in some states. So those are the spaces that we need to protect and guard, and we can really foster that inclusion through these conversations.
Well, thank you, Sujatha. Good, very thorough answer. I know, and I just have a question now also for Michael. I really, I really appreciate the 40x40, the 4x40 program. I know we access that at the University of Regina here at Johnson Shoyama, and I think in my experience, some people are apprehensive, and I do think that there's probably some different practices that you might be able to share in your experience about what are some of the apprehensions and misconceptions about hiring someone with an intellectual disability that you've encountered with employers, and how have you gained their buy-in in the process and partnership with the 4x40 or 4 to 40, sorry.
That's okay. Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, common apprehensions, Lord, each of these they're unique to each workplace, but there are some commonalities that we tend to experience and that tend to come up. And often it's around this idea of accommodations, right? And this perception that perhaps an accommodation might be quite costly, when in reality it's what the types of accommodations that a person with intellectual disability, excuse me, may require often are at no cost. Right. So there's this idea that not only is it going to be costly, but there's also this idea that, a person with an intellectual disability or a neurodivergent employee, they might have, higher rates of absenteeism, or they might require, they might experience reduced productivity because they require, extreme flexibility, or, training, for a neurodiverse employer, training in the company might be time consuming and ineffective. It's some of these challenges that are presented, they really are, misconceptions. And I think this often comes from the societal there's this societal attitudes and perceptions about what a person with a disability can and cannot do, right? And challenging those misconceptions by, through successes. And I think of the young lady that's working at Johnson Shoyama. It's an incredible success for not only for you as a school, but also for her as an employee, and the impact that is having on your workplace, I believe is truly profound. As an initiative, working within the supported employment realm, we've gained buy-in by positioning 4 to 40 as a resource for employers, right? Our process and ongoing support to further inclusion in the workplace, right? We're aiming to support corporate diversity strategies to include people with intellectual disabilities, as I mentioned previously, that are often overlooked, right? In essence, we're helping businesses and organizations create inclusion within diversity, right? We've had a lot of success over the past few years. As I shared on our slide there, organizations like SaskTel and Farm Credit Canada working together with various ministries in the provincial government, most notably the Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Immigration and Career Training, which is a funding partner of ours, but the Ministry of Labor Relations and Workplace Safety. And others like smaller employers like Ukrainian Co-op or the Hotel Saskatchewan. It's really about supporting those employers and helping to understand what are their needs and creating the conversation to discuss what's possible. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I know at JSGS, we were really pleased to learn about your program. We have a question here, and I think this, maybe for Lindsay or Sujatha would have some experience, but Michael, join in if you think you want to contribute as well. But the question is, given the current discourse around AI and its use in screening employment applications, how can HR embed EDI in the use of these tools to ensure that, to ensure inclusiveness in the hiring processes? And how about I start with you, Sujatha, and then Lindsay, if in your experience you've got any research there.
Okay, so I could come from a practical experience. I just recently did some hiring work, and some of these are some of the challenges, and I've heard from other HR professionals too of how AI and its use, because when you are looking at a resume or something that's written on paper, you come across and you shortlist and you have someone whom you think will interview really well, and you bring them for the first round of interviews. And at the stage of interviewing, we do encounter challenges there. But at the same time, we want to be inclusive, and we know hiring practices. Those are some of the things that we are grappling with. I don't think we have a solution, but we are looking at, because the traditional hiring practices is you need to just look at the resume, see your checkbox. You're not trying to be inclusive. You're not trying to see who is applying, and just to be objective in doing this work. And AI has introduced that element. The other thing, if you're using tools, you hear that constantly from people that AI will only pick up certain keywords, buzzwords, and it will not pick up because AI, I'm not very familiar with the tech side of it, but from what we hear is that it has been trained again in a very based out of a dominant cultural space. So I think that also impacts. So as professionals doing further recruiting, we need to kind of expand how we are going to do our recruiting and be really proactive. One of the things we did, which was very time consuming, was that we interviewed everybody who had put in an application. I mean, it cannot happen when there are thousands of applications, and we'd had a limited number. So that's something that we gave an opportunity, because we didn't have a big number here. We had about 11 or 12 people we had to interview, and then we were able to build on that. So that's, I think, a work in progress, and it's something that it's in its infancy. We are beginning to face these challenges, and we need to develop ways in which we can really be truly inclusive without discounting people or minimizing the value of individuals. I hope that answers a little bit as to what we are doing. I can only talk from practical side, and Lindsay, you might have something more from your research end on this.
We don't have a ton of research on the applications of AI as a resume screening tool, because the applications change so quickly and they evolve so quickly. It's really hard to get numbers on how they're being used or how they can be adapted to better integrate inclusion into the hiring processes. What I do have are kind of what employers are telling us. And we ran a survey with over 100 employers a couple months ago, and we asked them what they're using AI for. And 90% of them are just using them to help write job postings. They're not using them to screen resumes. They're not using any of the more advanced applications of AI that we've seen in other countries, or because there's a lot of apprehension about the equity of using AI for resume screening, right? So we're not really seeing it come up, although we do know it's an emerging theme that will likely change quite quickly, because I know AI wasn't really a growing concern when I went on maternity leave, and that was 2 years ago. And then I came back and now everyone's talking about it, right? So it changes so quickly that it's really hard to get numbers on exactly how it will be used in the future, because we're not really sure of what types of applications it can have, because it evolves so quickly.
I think it's fascinating. I think we'll see more of this in the future. But we have another question that I think probably for Michael and Lindsay, I mean, Sujatha, in the point about, how can employers feel confident in today's day and age with affirmative hiring and having EDI hiring practices? Any practical advice there? And maybe Michael, do you have any comments you want to add there? And then we'll turn it back to Sujatha.
I think it comes back to companies and businesses having a conversation around how do they themselves define inclusion, and when I think about for myself and the work that we do in Regina, I like to look at it from the perspective of, are we a reflection of the community in which we live? Right? And are we a reflection of for us working in human services, for the people in which we support? Or are we a reflection of our customers and those that we're providing services to? And I think when you look at this idea of diversity and inclusion through that definition, I think it becomes quite telling for many employers that there's a need to up their game, right? There's a need for improvement. And I look at the demographics of our own community in Regina, and is our workplace a true reflection of the demographics of the greater Regina community? And I know we have work to do, right? And is our workplace a reflection of our customers and the people that we're serving? I know we have work to do, right? And I think if employers are looking at ED&I through the perspective of where they live and who they're serving, it becomes very clear for them where they need to focus their time and efforts.
Thanks. Okay. Just to add to that, one of the key things that we need to think about when we are doing affirmative hiring is that affirmative hiring does not mean that you're getting someone who's less qualified, who's someone not able to do the task, because that is also something oftentimes it is equated as someone is getting into the job, but they do not really meet the criteria. Oftentimes, research has shown, and I'm sure, Lindsay, you'll have some more details on this, that I know like with gender diverse individuals, they have like 2 degrees, 3 degrees, and they are then competing for work. And again, the same with other individuals who are coming from equity seeking groups. And you also find that once they are in a job, it is very difficult for individuals or persons with disabilities, persons who have gender diverse who come from gender diverse groups, to change jobs. And that is something that we need to be aware of. They do not have the same mobility, work mobility that others can have, because they have to think a lot more whether they can go into a different environment, different space. So that's one thing that I would like to say. The other thing about affirmative hiring is that we need to go back to the structural and historical inequities, because and I can talk from personal experience, because I come from a background where it's a different type of inequity, but caste-based inequity, where we have like upper caste, middle caste, lower caste, and we have quotas for affirmative hiring there, and quotas in colleges, in universities. And individuals will never get into a space if we did not have those quotas, if we did not have those affirmative hiring spaces. Things are changing, and we need to also, one of the things is constantly review and evaluate how things are changing. Are the numbers more? Is representation more? And then see, because just outright saying we've done affirmative hiring for 10 years, now we don't need it anymore, does not make sense. And whether those individuals are then in leadership positions, again, you will find maybe University of Regina is meeting its targets for racialized individuals, but where are those individuals placed? Are they more in our custodial services? Are they more in leadership roles? So these are questions. It is a complex thing when we talk of affirmative hiring. And so we cannot just shoot it down that it's one thing and it's not needed.
Great, thank you. Very interesting. This next one, I open it up to any of the three of you who might have some knowledge around it. It's really looking at, is EDI or diversity considerations included in education and training for HR professionals? I don't know, Lindsay, if in your experience you have some knowledge of that from the Conference Board of Canada, or our other two panelists.
In certain organizations, it is like EDI training is part of the onboarding process, and it's part of leadership training in a lot of organizations. What that looks like and how effective it is kind of up for debate. It really depends on the organization and how much they're investing in EDI training. And is it like a one-time webinar when you are onboarded? Is it something you do every year? So there are varying degrees of what EDI training looks like across organizations. And ultimately, that means knowing how effective it is variable across organizations, because if the training isn't adequate, then the outcomes will likely also be inadequate.
And I think our participant here was also looking at, so our HR professionals being trained so that they have a good background as well as employees within the organization.
Yeah, most organizations do have EDI training across the board. There is specific training for HR practitioners as well. And I'm sure Sujatha will have kind of a better understanding of what that looks like in practice.
Great, thanks, Lindsay.
Just to add to what you said, Lindsay, is that sometimes mandatory training might seem like something that's imposed, particularly within the academic setting. Like at the University of Regina, it's for the new employees, we do have that as one of our ways of asking them to do a small, short online course on 4 seasons of reconciliation, because it gives an understanding of the historical issues around Indigenous peoples, and we have a respectful university training that is mandatory, and we have to complete it within a period of time. That being said, it is not something that's, as you rightly mentioned, Lynn, it's not imposed, or we do not have any penalties or issues. We encourage people to take these workshops and sessions. And also the other thing that I find more helpful from a practical positioning is that when faculties, departments reach out with specific needs, and oftentimes they will reach out once there's been a conflict, once there's been some disruption to the work, and using that as an opportunity to discuss how the principles of EDI is helpful. Doing a lot of proactive work is also helpful. So you need to have both. The reactive work is also there and proactive work, and they go hand in hand. Michael, you have something more to add there.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to chime in here, and I not to be a little bit of a negative Nelly, but I think that the question is really posing a challenge to academics. It's posing a challenge to faculty leads and deans of different colleges to think about the programs that they're offering, and are they still are they maintaining a current practice, and are those courses and those that are being taught keeping up with the times, quite frankly. And arguably, I would say they are not. And I know that because we are hiring. We have over 400 employees in Regina, and predominantly, University of Regina and Saskatchewan Polytechnic graduates. And many of these employees are telling us that they have virtually no disability training woven into their coursework. And I say this and with all due respect, but I look at programs like the Kinesiology and Health Studies at the University of Regina, that is one of the few faculties that actually has a number of disability courses and trainings. Where is the College of Business? Where is the Faculty of Social Work? There's a lot more work, at the University of Saskatchewan, Faculty of Medicine, involved in some conversations happening there. How are we training future physicians and healthcare professionals to actually understand this unique population of people that exists here in our own province, and they're not receiving any training or any education? Are we actually doing a disservice by not looking at these programs that are dated at best? And are we not, there needs to be a review of some of these programs and ensure that we're keeping up with the times and that the information is relevant and current in today's context.
And just to add to that, that's something we heard time and time again from both employers and employees, is that there is a significant lack of disability awareness in the workplace. And that leads to a lot of conflict in workplaces because you have managers and leaders who aren't equipped to deal with things like accommodation requests or disability disclosure. And that kind of perpetuates kind of the poor experiences that people with disabilities have in the workplace, and kind of limits their willingness to disclose and request accommodations because they've had such poor experiences in the past due to lack of knowledge on the organization's part, right?
Yeah, it goes back to Michael's comments where he was talking about, these apprehensions and misconceptions that people have. How do you get past that, and how do you encourage both the professionals who are supporting an organization in managing the human resources, but also, ensuring that it is embedded into your organization? This next question, I think I'll lob it to you, Michael, to start, but just to give Sujatha, because a practicing HR person, you've got lots of these practical pieces. But I think, Michael, you may have come across this around, the folks that you work with. What are some strategies that are out there for identifying targeted methods of posting to effectively reach specific demographic groups for preferential hiring within organizations? Like, how do you actually, make yourself seen as an employer that is open to these great opportunities? You're on mute, Michael. Just
there we go. Thank you. That's interesting because I think so much of what we're doing is relationship based, and that Saskatchewan's a big small town, right? Saskatoon, Regina, these are big small towns, and so much of what we're doing is relational. What we know is that there's a lot of good work that's being done in our community. We know that there are a diverse number of organizations working with, whether it's newcomers or working with different groups of people, trying to support them. And there's a common thread that's woven through all of this work that's happening within the community service organizations, and that's helping to connect people. And often employment is an aspect of their programs that they're supporting. Are employers taking advantage of opportunities to better connect and to forge those connections with these different groups and organizations that exist within their community? Or are they just simply posting a job on SAS Jobs or Indeed, right? I think there's a huge missed opportunity by not connecting with and forging relationships with those different groups and organizations that are doing and are working with these different marginalized groups that exist within our community. And I think when the businesses and the companies and employers that we're working with, they're seeing the successes through those relationships that are being forged. And I would challenge employers to look at their own community. And I know there's many on this call that are from Saskatoon or Regina, but of course other places as well. But I can tell you there are organizations working in your backyard that are working with, whether it's new Canadians or people with disabilities or folks from the various vulnerable sectors, and they would be thrilled to have a conversation with you and can help to support you in your hiring efforts. It's through those relationships where you're going to have the greatest success, not just simply posting a job. Right.
Well, I think in one of my personal experiences, it was turning it backwards to, instead of thinking, here's my job and what kinds of people, looking at, we want to make this initiative. So looking at the people and saying what in our workplace could accommodate those individuals. So it was an interesting to switch it on it in a different way.
Yeah, and Lynn, just kind of building off of that, one of the conversations we often have with employers are, what are those tasks? What are those jobs that often aren't in anyone's job description, that kind of get tacked onto the side of someone's desk that somebody has to do, but it's a really important job, right? Or what are those positions and what are those roles that they're experiencing high turnover, that they're seeing constant, turnover in terms of staffing in those roles? And how can we help them, review or analyze that job posting and realize that maybe this is actually two part-time roles, or is this a job that somebody can come in and do for 4, 8, 12 hours a week, and that's all you need. But to have that person that can come and fill that task in a truly meaningful way, that's energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate about that work, but it's only 12 hours, right? How beneficial could that be to the workplace? Right. So it's looking at traditional job postings differently, and it's looking at the roles and the tasks that often exist within workplaces, and breaking down those tasks. And of course, because employers are the experts of their own business. Where our knowledge base is with the people that we support, those that we're supporting with intellectual disabilities, we often are able to come together and start to make some bridges or connections where there's helping to give them a connection to people or a group of people that might be a good fit for that role, right?
Great, thank
you.
Sujatha, sorry.
Just tagging on to what you said, Michael, I just wanted to give a practical example of what we did last November. We did partner with the Autism Resource Center and did a talent career fair with persons who attend the center. And we had about 17 individuals doing mock interviews and signing up, even showing them how to sign up for a career alert, and with our talent acquisition team. And with some of our other services, we were able to do that. So I think those are like the impactful ways in which we then demystify. Otherwise, University of Regina can be seen as an organization that individuals might find it very difficult to even apply to, or feel safe enough to apply to. So just building those relationships, trying to talk about the work, trying to support people. The other example that I also wanted to share was in my previous work with the Regina Open Door Society, where we did some work with someone with mental health disabilities, and arranged for some volunteer work with Carmichael's, which then kind of built that relationship. It takes effort, it takes time. And I think that, and we need to see, and employers and as people, leadership individuals have to see that that is time worth given, and that is going to enhance the institution and enhance the people too. So this really helped, because, and we had to do a lot of work because the person did not have conversation skills in English, and we had to have an interpreter. So it involved time, it involved effort, it also involved money. It all comes down to how intentional we are in doing those actions. So those are some practical things that as employers we can do, and reaching out and supporting people to feel comfortable with your organization and the persons they are going to be working with. So that is something that I wanted to share. The other thing that HR also, our business partners, do within the organization is working with search committees and hiring committees, before hiring is done to ensure that there is some workshops and on unconscious bias, inclusion, how do we do inclusive hiring. So that is a very helpful way in which, and it's also practical, and everyone is willing to listen. How do we do this? Because there is a task to be done. So that's another space that HR has been working on at the university. Sorry, Lindsay.
It's okay. Just to add on to that, one thing we've worked with employers on is if they look at their pool of applicants, and if everyone looks the same, maybe they need to diversify where they're posting their jobs, right? If you're trying to recruit a certain group of individuals or just broaden the diversity of those who are applying, looking at broadening your recruitment strategy is one thing that, can really help with that. If you're looking for more women in trades, there are tons of organizations that promote women in trades. Maybe post your job with them as well as the normal channels that you use, right? So.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. We had a question about the U of R and how fully accessible it is physically, and I think Karen's just dealt with that question by posting from the U of R website some points into the chat that kind of answer how our facilities are managed to ensure accessibility. So I don't know, Sujatha, if you have anything else you want to add to that.
Well, actually, I have something to add because we have now an accessibility plan development committee, and we are developing a plan for the University of Regina looking at all the barriers to accessibility. And we have a student as well as a consultant working, and we will be doing a lot of community engagement with different groups on campus, outside within Regina, to see how the university can be accessible. And yesterday when I was talking to Astonished, which is one of the groups on our campus, they were saying for physical accessibility, the university is doing quite well. And we do have, there will always be space for improvement. We need more spaces for improvement. Like we are now trying to post a map on fully accessible washrooms, all gender washrooms. So it's a work in progress. We cannot say that we are there. And also looking at barriers. Barriers are not just physical, the environmental barriers, but we also have attitudinal barriers. We have technological barriers. So looking at it overall, and we are trying to come up with a plan that is going to be developed, and we will be engaging a lot with the campus community. So if that is something that the university is really working towards at this point.
I was just going to say, I like to see that when I worked in Saskatchewan's provincial parks, it was having people firsthand experience. You'd be surprised if you're not experiencing disability, you may not understand something is a real obstacle, and so that engagement is so important. And Michael, I see you have something to contribute here.
No, actually, honestly, though, Lynn, it was just building off of your sentence or statement there as well. Is kudos to the University of Regina, and I think they have made incredible strides to create a more accessible, welcoming space at the university, and that was very intentional. And of course, that work is ongoing. But what I really appreciate most about the work at the U of R is that their openness and willingness to engage their various stakeholder groups and the users of the university, because often when we look at accessibility plans, there's some really well-intentioned people that are trying to craft a really great plan, but because they don't experience disability themselves, they often don't realize that there's barriers that are created that have often been overlooked or missed. And it's through that consultation and the conversation with people with lived experience is where you can truly create a truly inclusive workspace or campus. So I kudos to the U of R for engaging the community in that work.
Thank you. Thank you. We just have time for a couple more questions, and I have one more that I'll pose, and then we'll start moving into some closing remarks here. But the one question that we still haven't got to yet was, what would be inclusive onboarding? What would that look like in a day-to-day, everyday world? So this is somebody I think is asking here about, some real practical advice. And maybe Sujatha, do you want to give it a start, and we'll see if Lindsay and Michael want to contribute?
I think inclusive onboarding will be two-pronged. One is like working with the existing team. If someone is going to be coming into a team, the team members have to have that education, understanding. And I can say that from a racialized perspective, I can talk from my lived experience, and transfer some of those things, that when you are going into an organization, that individuals have to be have that education, their knowledge, how are they going to work across affinity groups. And then the person who's also being going to join the team has to be enabled to have their own say and express what would make them feel comfortable. Because oftentimes we can decide that this is what will make the person comfortable, as you rightly said, Michael. But having someone with personal experience say, this is how I would like to be helped, and having that understanding to listen, engage, and then to create that space and see how that works, and that co-creation. And that's something that currently I'm also working with and listening to a lot of the traditional knowledge of co-creation, doing things jointly, that comes from the indigenous learning spaces, where knowledge should be co-created. Anything that is being done should be co-created. And I think that's something that would help us, because we have become a society where we are more individualized and individualistic, and just driven by success. And for us, success looks in specific ways, which is mostly defined normatively by dominant cultural uh, groups or individuals who are in privileged spaces. And I will include myself in that space, because we all experience spaces where we are privileged. And we really need to really understand what lack of privilege feels, is to listen, to learn, to have that humility to understand. So that's my little bit on that.
Thanks, Sujatha. Michael or Lindsay, did you have anything you want to contribute there, or does that we?
Even I think Sujatha has kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's really about how we're introducing and welcoming that person into the workplace. And I think from the perspective of the work that we're doing, that onboarding process is absolutely critical to the success of that employee and that team. And that onboarding process is, it's not complex. It's really about helping to be the bridge builder and build in that connection, that relationship piece, helping people see each other as a person and the values and the gifts and the strengths that they bring to the team. It's also an opportunity to help dispel some of those myths and misconceptions around disability, and particularly that might exist within that team, and also providing that team with a comfortable atmosphere or opportunity to ask some of those questions that they might be thinking but aren't brave enough to bring forward. And when you bring together people to have an open, honest conversation and sharing and getting to know each other, you're starting to see the humanity in the work that we're all doing, and the humanity in each other and the gifts that we each bring to the workplace.
Great, thank you.
And just to add on to that, sorry, Lynn, the other half of the work we're doing with the Canadian Association for Supported Employment is all around mentorship and the importance of mentorship, and how that can be a really good lever organizations can pull to get individuals onboarded quickly and responsibly, and give them access to all of the information that they need, specifically for people with disabilities. If they're working or being mentored by someone who has lived experience and has navigated some or has familiarity with the challenges that they've encountered in the workplace, having someone to bounce ideas off of or learn from is a really empowering part of mentorship that shouldn't be overlooked as part of an onboarding process.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I think we have some really great comments in the chat. I think we have one around the Accessibility Saskatchewan Act, and really recommend folks take a look at those comments. Where we have just a few minutes left here, and I think before I'll give you each a couple minutes for closing remarks if you have anything you want to add. But we have one more question here, and that is, do you suggest rebranding EDI to remove any ideological or political connections associated with it? Or is there any risk with rebranding EDI? I think that's an interesting thought. And I don't know who wants to start here. Sujatha, maybe?
Sure. I think
Thanks.
that's a question for me, which I've been asked quite a bit. And one of the things with rebranding or changing the terminology, I know some universities have done that and changed it to like just looking at inclusion, belonging, or words like that. Some of discounting those experiences, the historical systemic inequities, and just changing or rebranding does not make those things go away. They are there. Those inequities exist. And we need to be really invested in acknowledging that. I mean, today morning in that forum, we were told without truth, there cannot be reconciliation. We need to be truthful, because in today's world, that is what is constantly happening. The people say this did not happen, or these things should not be given that much importance. I mean, that's the narrative today. But really, the inequities did exist. Colonization did happen. Children were taken away from their homes. People were harmed. Slaves, the slave trades. There are so many examples that all of us know throughout the world and is still happening. So I think if we just say that equity, diversity, and inclusion, they are words, but if we all look at their meaning, then we will really acknowledge they are important. All of us want to be treated fairly. All of us want fairness in processes, in outcomes. So equity is something that applies to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we all want to feel included in whichever space we are. And we all have intersectional identities. I'm not just one person. I'm a diverse person. I come with different hats, different roles, different spaces. So I think rebranding does not really mean that it's just a rebranding is like, for public opinion, for optics. Like when George Brown's incident happened, everyone went for all companies, for organizations. It looked good to have EDI. 5 years down the line, this happened in 2020. In 5 years down the line, a change, rebranding happens, but the issues remain, and that is where we need to focus our attention on, not just where the terminology is changing or going.
Thank you. I know I did some research on generational differences in the workplace and really similar types of things. We all have similar expectations on how we want to be treated, and I really appreciate your comments there, because I think that's very true around practice and principles with EDI. So thank you. I'll give Lindsay. We're going to wrap it up now. So Lindsay, any last comments before we close for the afternoon?
I think just on the shift, or the shift away from using the EDI terminology, we're seeing that with a lot of organizations who are subsidiaries of US companies for obvious reasons. But what we're seeing is just the words change. All the work that they're doing doesn't really change. They're still advancing the same initiatives they were before they changed their name. So I don't think the intent of EDI is going anywhere. It might be called something different, but organizations are invested in equity, diversity, and inclusion. Some might call it workplace culture now, or belonging, or people first, but it's inherently equity, diversity, and inclusion, just wearing a different name. So I don't think we're going to shift away from all of the progress that we have made.
Thank you, Lindsay. And Sujatha.
Oh, I mean, it's about optics. We live in a world where everything is branding and everything about optics and everything where money is involved. So if somebody controls your funding, then that is where it is. But my fear is that we cannot dilute it. We cannot move away. And also bearing in mind, there are people who are standing up to it, like Harvard, even when they lost so much of their money, Costco, Apple. There are big organizations who are taking a stand. And I think having those allies amongst us and having allies is important, and building those allies, and 90% would agree or be allies. They may not voice it, they may not be vocal, but we need to engage more, talk about this more, and also engage with those who have contradictory voices. Because I think that is important and crucial to hear where they are coming from and then having a dialogue, not in a debate where we are trying to overcome their point of view, not just a discussion where nothing gets done, but having a true dialogue, I think will be really meaningful.
Thank you, Sujatha. And Michael, last minute word.
Thanks, Lynn. I guess so to leave the attendees with a few final thoughts here. What I know to be true is that something like 70% of people with intellectual disabilities are unemployed in this country. Yet many industries are faced with a human resource crisis. They can't find the people and the talent to keep their businesses open and operating. Yet we have this untapped pool of people that have skills, are passionate, creative, and desperately want to be truly included in a meaningful way. We just need to get over ourselves and reject these pervasive attitudes that still exist within our communities about what people with disabilities can and cannot do, right? I would encourage you and challenge you to think about the possibilities, about what exists, and the benefits that by doing so will bring to your workplace. Thank you.
Thank you. So, as I wrap up here, that's my job as moderator to close out. It's been such a good discussion. It's hard to move past, but I do want to start the closing by really giving our gratitude and thank today's speakers, Lindsay, Michael, and Sujatha, for your insightful observations on how we can strengthen EDI approach in HR and create a more inclusive and resilient teams in our organizations. And so, just whether you want to virtually clap or show your hands clapping, just to extend our appreciation to you for taking your time this afternoon to speak with us and answer so many excellent questions. So, I also get the joy of promoting JSGS events. So if you've enjoyed this lecture, which I know I have, I hope that you keep an eye out for future JSGS events through our calendar, where upcoming events and program information is being promoted, and including our next EDI discussion series presentation that's going to take place on Wednesday, May 21st. And it will be a discussion on healthcare for diverse communities, creating inclusive care. And I think that's another very important topic, and I hope you can join us for that. Karen, who's been with us throughout this afternoon, making sure everything runs smoothly, I'd like to thank her, and she is also putting into the links information if you'd like to join us on the 21st for that next event. So thank you very much, all of you, for participating today in this very important topic. And I hope that we see you join a future JSGS event. So we'll sign off now, and I hope you have a great afternoon.